April 2019. It's a Monday, 6:48 p.m. And yeah, now it's started. Yeah, all right. Hello, finally. Now we've made it so far. It's been, I don't know, half an hour or so. So, first things first, what brings you to Latvia and what are your impressions?
Well, I'm here in Latvia because I decided to do a small road trip around Lithuania because I was here at the same place 2 years ago, but I was going to Estonia. I was going to visit a friend there. And I really like Latvia, but I didn't get to go to Lithuania back then. So this year I decided I should come to Lithuania, but the most convenient place to fly to was Riga. And here I am. So I flew to Riga actually last Thursday, and then I was just going around Lithuania, and now I'm back in Riga because tomorrow I'm flying back.
You mean flying back to Portugal?
To the Czech Republic.
So you are quite impressed, I take it, from the Baltics.
Yes, I really like the Baltics. I was very pleasantly surprised with Lithuania, which was a country that I didn't have so much expectations. Actually, I did have much more expectations about Estonia 2 years ago, but it was kind of below the expectation because there is such a hype with Estonia right now with the whole startup scene and the e-citizenship and tourism. But I didn't find it to be, that interesting. I mean, Tallinn was interesting, but not as good as Riga, in my opinion. In my opinion, Riga is by far the most interesting Baltic capital. It's the most charming. It's the best.
Oh, you mean culturally and architecturally?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I would imagine if you go to Tallinn, that you just see more of, let's say, a Scandinavian vibe that you see maybe outside of Estonia.
Yeah, kind of. But the thing about Tallinn that I didn't like so much because there was this area of the old town, but outside the old town it's just normal, kind of communist style buildings. They call them panelák in the Czech Republic. This kind of panelák building. And the only two things of interest that I found outside of the old town of Tallinn was the port, the heliport, the old port, I don't know what's the name, I don't remember now, and the Pirita monastery, the ruins, so it's very interesting. But other than that, there was not much. Vilnius, as a city, I didn't find it particularly interesting. I did find Trakai to be very interesting. Trakai is a small town near Vilnius. It's like 30 minutes away. They have just lakes and some famous castle. I believe it used to belong to the Teutonic Order and so on. So it's a very interesting historical place, and the place itself, the lakes there, it's very nice.
So what are the things that you are looking for when you travel?
Well, I'm looking for mostly interesting historical sites. I really like the old towns, these towns with the cobblestones and the old houses with the typical architecture. I don't like places that are too overcrowded with tourists, which is the case of Prague and Lisbon, which are completely overrun with tourists. So I kind of like this place with kind of a different vibe, but at the same time it should be historical and with, if possible, with nice nature around, be it forests or lakes or the sea, mostly the sea, because I'm very fond of the sea, especially the Baltic Sea.
It would have been a cool answer if you would said, well, I'm looking for brothels.
Yeah.
Because I imagine that should be a travel vlog. Can you imagine?
Well, speaking of brothels...
Somebody going through all the European cities just to look at the brothels?
That's interesting. Now, speaking of brothels, on a more serious note, probably you are aware of it, but I think one of the first times that I've heard about Riga in Portugal, because we don't talk much about Latvia. Yeah. I think the first reference ever that I heard about Latvia was back in 2004 when Latvia was joining, even before when Latvia was joining the European Union, and then the European Championship that they were playing. But a few years later, I saw a documentary about Riga that used to be the sex tourism capital of Europe.
Was it afterwards? I thought it was beforehand. There was a Scandinavian, a Swedish director who made a film. I think it was in 2001 or 2002, and they made the documentary about how Riga is becoming quickly a place for sex tourists from especially Great Britain.
Yeah, but it was. I don't think it was the same because I think
Maybe
it was
they
something
have-
like from BBC or 60 Minutes or.
Well,
so.
maybe there have been.
But it
a
was
couple.
similar theme because
I mean, the
when
theme is the same, sure.
Communists fell and the whole Soviet Union
But
collapsed.
see-
the economy was in shambles.
But see,
And there
that's
was a lot
the,
of poverty. So
that's where the airport comes in, right? Because in general, I don't think we have had anything different than the rest of the Baltics or Eastern Europe, for that matter. It's just that the airport was so conveniently connected. So,
Yeah.
like you said, you were going to actually Lithuania,
Mhm.
but since the airport and the air traffic is so convenient through Riga,
Mhm.
you come through Riga.
Yes,
I
yes.
think it's
But
the main point.
the airport in Riga is the largest airport in the Baltics, and it's
Ah.
considered the main airport in the Baltics. I think if you do some research, you will find that I think last year this was like the year when they had the most passengers there, or something like that. And
I mean,
because it keeps
yeah.
on increasing because of
That's what I'm
tourism
saying.
and so on.
Yeah.
And even Air Baltic, they have been growing and thriving.
I would imagine. You know, speaking about prostitution, you know what I saw as a documentary that now I'm mistaken, but I think the documentary was about French people coming to, well, either I think it was Spain. Yeah, I think it was Spain. I'm mistaking it for Portugal, but it was Spain. That French people are coming to Spain because Spain has some sort of flexible laws.
Oh, I didn't know.
And France, on the other hand, a couple of years ago, made their laws even stricter. So now there's a big tendency for French tourists to come to Spain. But yeah, that was I think that was Spain for sure. But you know what about Portugal? I always had a question: how is the situation with the drugs over there? Because I remember reading that, I don't know, 2000 something, they
Early
legalized or
2000s.
decriminalized.
They decriminalized.
Yeah.
the
So
consumption
how's
of
that
drugs.
going?
Well, it's,
Can I check your veins, by the way?
Hmm?
Can I check your veins, by the way?
yeah. No, but speaking of drugs, I don't know if you are aware of this, but during the 80s and the 90s,
Hmm?
we had a huge drug problem in Portugal, and I believe not my generation, but the generation
what?
before me.
From what?
I believe like 1/3 of that generation, I believe, or probably around that, or maybe
Portugal
or
had
one
always-
quarter was having issues with drugs because it was a huge port of entry.
All right.
In
It still is,
into Europe. Yes, exactly. And we had this neighborhood in Lisbon, very dangerous neighborhood, which used to be considered the biggest drug supermarket in Europe.
Hmm.
Throughout the 80s and the 90s, it was complete degradation. It was like that, those favelas that you see in the movies about, Brazil and
Mhm.
Latin America, or pretty much even worse than what you see in this series, Narcos. It's just horrible, just degradation.
Mhm.
Because why did we have such a problem with drugs? Well, I don't know precisely, but I've heard one thesis that during the 70s we transitioned into democracy.
Too much disco.
Mm,
During the 70s, we had too much disco, so everybody started using cocaine.
well, yeah, that too, because there was an aspect that we transitioned into democracy. So all these disco things and all
From
this-
what?
From dictatorship. We had a dictatorship.
Oh, damn. So who
From
was
the
the dictator?
1926 to 1974.
From
It was
18?
called 1926 to
Right.
1974. It was the second Portuguese Republic. We had our first republic implemented in 1910.
All right.
Between 1910 and 1926, it was a lot of political instability, and then the dictatorship took power. We had a coup d'état, a military coup, and then there was a military dictatorship throughout the first few years, and then in the early 30s, Salazar rose to power.
Who?
He was a fascist, Antonio Salazar. You can Google him.
Salvador. All right.
Yeah.
I think I've never heard of him.
But just speaking of dictatorship, now we notice how we drifted from prostitution to dictatorship. But
Just natural.
I understand that you guys in Latvia suffered a lot under communism and you had a lot of scarcity and poverty. But can you tell me what was the situation, I don't know, throughout the 50s, 60s, you know, after this post-war period in terms of, you know, literacy and poverty? Because in Portugal, we had huge rates of poverty, huge rates of child mortality, and you know people were just completely miserable. We were a third world country pretty much, and not only after the war, pretty much you know after
What
the
would
war.
what would you consider poverty?
You know, poverty. You know, people living in basically what looked like slums or in a very underdeveloped society. Back then, it was still too much.
Well, in
Very
that
much
sense,
agrarian, you know. I believe we were
That
even
was-
behind the Eastern Bloc because from what
I don't
I've
know.
seen,
I don't know. Look at it this way: up till the up to the mid '90s, it was fairly common for every family to have a what's it called? Well, a sort of a piece of land where they grow their potatoes and vegetables, and basically their maybe not all of their groceries, but a big part they grew themselves, right? And so once the commercial capitalism came in, it started becoming less and less, and now it's fairly common that everybody just goes to the grocery store and gets their groceries that way, right? But up until the mid 90s, it was fairly common, including our family, that we just grew the main things that we consumed during the whole year for lunch, for instance, that we had grown ourselves many times, or either if it's let's say some type of meat product, then maybe we just traded or bartered for it. But and afterwards, once the stores opened up, and now you can say there's quite economic growth, right? Yeah, it's not really that common, but so that was the main source of food, of calories, that people actually grew their food themselves, and
they were more
the
autonomous.
the cooperatives were actually the main source of. I think they were the main source of work for people, because it was a crime to not work, right? So everybody had to work, even gypsies, who are stereotyped as being so.
We have gypsies here?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know there was.
I mean, do any countries not have gypsies?
Well, I don't know. I thought that they didn't have. I thought it was only Portugal, a problem in Portugal and Spain. But I saw that in Czech Republic they have quite a few of them.
I mean, I think they're all over the place.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the Jews. They are all over the place. It's just that they don't establish themselves so well as the Jews.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Because other than that, I think they are quite similar in their their preferences to spread outside of a particular boundary.
They don't have a specific. Well, Jews now have a nation, Israel, but yeah, before they didn't used to have.
I think technically gypsies have also Romania, but I would guess it's not really technically.
Well, I've
for
heard
them.
that it's not exactly in Romania. There is like some piece of land in between Romania and Moldova, but I'm not 100%
Yeah,
sure.
might be the case. Might be the case.
But speaking of the dictatorship, can I ask you what was the situation regarding education and access to healthcare in Latvia? Because from what I understand, you had the state controlled the education, the transport.
I think.
Right? But everyone pretty much had access, no?
I think it's safe to say that after Stalin was dead, starting up from the 60s, everybody had actually, at least the basic access to at least some emergency help. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that the medical system was as advanced in its logistics as it is now. But yeah, you definitely had some at least basic things. When it comes to the rural areas, I think most of the time it was fairly difficult. If you could say that now you definitely can get an ambulance, let's say within 20 minutes, 30 minutes to all the spots in our country, then it was probably more than an hour perhaps. Sometimes in the cities, I don't think that's a big difference. I mean, in Riga, for instance, you had definitely some hospitals, even then, right? But yeah, it's definitely a big difference when it comes to the automobiles and the logistics in the rural areas.
Well, in Portugal, it was very underdeveloped. We didn't have proper roads. People were, it was common to see, very poor children in the streets. Pretty much like what you would imagine in some poor South American country. There was a lot of illiteracy. There was a lot of childbirth and death. And,
compared to these statistics, I would say definitely the Soviet bloc was more advanced. That's for sure. Because again, there was no real, how would you say, liberty to not work, or to not do something. So everybody had to do something, whether it's work, go to the army, or whatever the case may be. I don't know if it's, let's put it this way. If we had the same climate, I don't know if the rules would be so strict. Because I think it's the climate that does it. Don't you think? I think
not necessarily.
If you
it's
are
the genetics,
warm,
then you can argue that it's somewhat of a result of the climate.
But European is European, right? In a sense.
No, there is much diversity within Europe. I mean, a person from the Mediterranean is not the same as a person from the Baltic, which is not the same. Even Balts and Slavs, they are different. They are not the same.
I get it.
They have many similarities indeed. Because you even see there is some, or so I've heard in Latvia, because there is like the Latvians, ethnic Latvians, and there is the ethnic Russians, and there is some controversy between them. But just to get back to what I was speaking about, so we had this dictatorship, because you don't often hear so much about it, and it's ironic because you had the Western Bloc that was supposedly fighting communism and authoritarianism, because that's the image that we had. The people in the so-called Eastern Bloc, they have this authoritarian regime, there is the police state and so on. But in Portugal, we had much the same. And the Allied powers, or the NATO powers, they were pretty much okay with it, because back then, throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, we were basically a stronghold against communism, because it was a fascist government.
Portugal?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Because of our strategical position. The Americans, they had their military bases in the Portuguese islands, and we had some important strategical importance because of our location. We were also a colonial power until very late. I believe we were among the last countries to go through decolonization, because we had colonies until the 70s.
Really?
Because we then transitioned into democracy in 1974, and it was only after that we stopped pretty much having all the colonies that we have in Africa. We had this decolonization in India back in the 60s before, and then in Africa, Angola, Mozambique.
Wasn't Hong Kong at one point in time?
Macau in China, near Hong Kong. It was a colony until 1999. I remember vaguely watching it on television, the ceremony of finishing formally. But regarding the drugs, so there was when there was this decolonization going on, there was a lot of fighting in the colonies, because there was a full-blown war between the Portuguese army and the colonies who wanted to become independent. And this was in the 70s, more or less around the same time of the war with Vietnam, because if you probably have heard of this, there is a lot of people, a lot of American soldiers that got addicted to drugs in Vietnam because they were doing drugs. Back then it started to be a thing, and then they came back home and they took their addictions with them. And it was in a way similar situation with Portugal, because they came from the war, they had all the wounds, the traumas, and they brought, because it was in Africa, it was some exotic country, so they had quite a few drugs there. That's what I've heard of. So that's how the drugs pretty much started entering Portugal. And then, of course, throughout the late 70s, early 80s, there was a lot of this globalization coming in, all this free market capitalism, all this cultural, Marxism, to call it this way, started entering, and people started getting influenced by the movies, and started to feel, that was very edgy, I'm going to do drugs, because, the punk movement, pretty much. There was even some people who tried to do the whole hippie movement, and then it evolved to the kind of punk movement in the 80s. So a lot of people got into drugs. So we had this huge problem. And then in the late 1990s, early 2000s, because also the prevalence of HIV was very high, so they decided to take another approach rather than the traditional war on drugs that you saw in the USA. What they did, they invested quite a lot in education. My generation, we were very educated since primary school about the dangers of drugs, about the dangers, of risk practices such as, unprotected sex and so on. And there was a lot of talk in the media about this issue, about drugs, HIV, unwanted pregnancies and so on. And then they introduced this bill that would decriminalize the possession of drugs. I mean, if you are trying to sell drugs, you still can go to jail. There is some exception. There's like if you have up to 1 gram of drugs with you, it's considered for self-consumption and so on. And another thing that they implemented is they tried to invest a lot of money into rehabilitation of people, into getting them spaces where they could, the people who were addicted, they could go there. I mean, they could still engage in the consumption, but they could also have access to some clinical help, to some healthcare. They would go and get, if they have some infectious disease, they would get some antibiotics, some medicines. They would get some psychotherapy to help them get out of the addiction. And it was not 100% perfect, but I believe we were a major success because we saved so many lives. And it's much better now. Even that areas which were previously, the biggest drug supermarket in Europe, it's much better now if you go there. And it's actually getting more and more trendy because with the whole tourism and so on, the whole area is being rehabilitated and it's becoming quite trendy. So yeah, that's the story.
So would you say that, have you heard of the Swiss model? Because I think they even hand out free heroin.
Well, we don't hand out free heroin, but we did hand out disinfected syringes because there was a lot of people using infected syringes, and there was a lot of diseases, HIV.
Does that mean that it is not punishable if you are, let's say, on the street and just shooting heroin?
No, it's not punishable. I don't think so. I think most likely they would just ask you to go somewhere else, like if the police caught you. I think so. I mean, you don't see them really much nowadays, but I don't think it's punishable. I mean, most likely they will try to take you somewhere else. You can go to this designated place when they can, because they would hand you some free syringes and so on.
But that is culturally quite different, right, from the rest of the European
Well, I think some other countries started adopting something similar, because I've heard that I believe it was either Sweden or Norway, they adapted something similar.
No, Sweden,
no, didn't they?
Sweden. Well,
I know that one Nordic country, one Scandinavian country, they did adopt.
I don't know
something
about
similar.
Norway, but Sweden is quite strict when it comes to all drugs, not just illegal, but also legal drugs. They're really, really strict. Maybe Denmark.
Oh, maybe.
Because I've heard that they have the, I don't know how the part is called, but they have a part where basically the police don't even come in. They don't really bother to come in, so everybody is just using whatever they want. I've heard that about Denmark. Yeah, so it's a very, very liberal country in a sense. Well, yeah. I don't know how's that going.
How do you guys handle this in Latvia in terms of drugs? What is your situation?
Well, I would say we have still the Eastern European or for post-Soviet style of punishable action. So it's just I don't.
That you had some. I don't know what's the right word, if ghetto or slum or something near Liepaja. I saw some documentary for it that that the place has a very bad reputation. It's near Liepaja, some old apartment block which is completely abandoned, and so some people go there, live there, like squatting there or whatever they call it, like squatters or occupying, and then they are completely excluded and they just do drugs and alcohol. Have you ever heard of it?
No, really. I mean, if you talk about Liepaja, the only thing outside of Liepaja that is worth of mention would be the what's it called, the former prison, I think. That was sort of a prison,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I think it was a political prison for a while in the Soviet times.
they also have, I believe, some few old bunkers, right, in the beach. I've heard. I've
Yeah,
seen
that's for
some
sure.
mention,
I mean, Liepāja, no, I think all the port cities, they were fairly militarized. So yeah,
I was just in Klaipėda in Lithuania, and it was very much militarized. They had the fort there,
Mhm.
so I actually got to visit the museum. So the Germans used to have some important positions there. A lot of defense mechanisms, heavy weaponry.
Mhm. I take it that you are quite interested in history.
Yes, I am. I am.
How come?
Well, I don't know. I've always been interested in history. I remember when I was a kid, I really enjoyed to watch the History Channel.
Hmm.
It was, I don't know, I believe like in the morning I would watch cartoons.
Mhm.
And then in the afternoon when I was on vacation or when I didn't have school, I was just watching the History Channel, the documentaries and so on. I'm just interested in that.
So you do also do your studies when it comes to academic life?
Well, my academic background is quite different. I have a degree in pharmacy,
Mhm.
so I didn't study history formally, but I just like to do some research and watch some documentaries, read some articles, read some books about history.
Mhm. Am I wrong in the assumption that Portuguese people are just Spaniards with a lot of more esh in their words?
The language.
Yeah,
That's an interesting way to put it.
because
Well,
I couldn't tell a Spaniard from a Portuguese dude apart. I think they're so resembling each other. It's
Not
just
too
that
much,
the
but
Port-
it's normal if you're not too much exposed to it. Because when I went to Czech Republic 2 years ago, I couldn't tell Czech apart from Slovak, and I can tell you that
I couldn't still.
Czech and Slovak are much more similar than Portuguese and Spanish.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying.
But now I can tell
So
them
that
apart.
they are neighbors.
But I don't know. I don't think that I'm the right person to tell because I'm a native speaker. So for me, like it has nothing to do. But maybe there is some. But I would say okay, maybe Spaniard with a lot of sh we have and we have a lot of sounds. This kind
Mhm.
of soft sounds. I would. I don't know. Maybe I will do some stupid analogy, but I would say like if Spanish would be Czech.
All right.
Portuguese would be Polish because Polish you have a lot of sh. I mean, Czech has some bit of sh and ch, but not as much as Polish.
Mm-hmm.
Polish is like sh. Like, for example, this city,
Got it.
Szczecin. So it's very
Szczecin,
hard to,
yeah. Yeah. Well, it's. I think we at one point in time Latvians even used. I think the reason why we have the same.
Diacritic.
Yeah, the same symbols is because at the time they founded either founded the country or even before that when publishing became prominent, they didn't have any native Latvian letters, so they had to use what's closest, and so they took from the Czech.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah.
As far as I know, yeah. So anyway, you are now in the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
So what's up there?
Well, the economy is booming.
Yeah, is
Salaries are rising. Housing prices are climbing,
Mm-hmm.
skyrocketing, I would say. It's been just crazy. But there is a very vibrant startup scene. There is huge, or there has been a huge influx also of foreign companies, foreign investment tech companies. And there is
Why in Czech Republic?
well, I think you can see that pattern maybe in Poland too. I don't know to which degree in Latvia, but Czech Republic is considered to be still in the old Eastern Bloc or the former Eastern Bloc. So the costs of work are very competitive comparing to Germany or Austria. And if you are a company, a multinational, you can see that you can attract a decent talent pool in Czech Republic for a competitive price. And they have very good services especially in terms of engineering and development. You have very good companies that have a lot of operations there. Like take for example, IBM Motorola, which is now I guess it's called Zebra, AT&T, and there is quite a lot of other companies there. They have a lot of call center operations there. They have a lot of IT tech and also startups because Czech people, I found them to be quite entrepreneurial.
Really?
And it's quite common that, for example, Czechs, and especially the newest generation, maybe not the oldest, but the newest, the Czechs, they, for example, go to study abroad or they go to work abroad in let's say, England, either Germany, or more often than not in the United States, in Silicon Valley. They get inspiration and they start businesses there. So there are quite a lot of startups that, they are started by Czechs in Czech Republic. And they have, for example, tech operations in the Czech Republic, and they can have like their marketing team in, let's say, the United Kingdom, London, or in Silicon Valley, or somewhere in the USA. For example, the company I'm working for currently, we have this situation. Our founder, our CEO is Czech. He went to Silicon Valley a few years ago. He got a lot of know-how from the market, and he just started his company. So they started as pretty much a garage company in Silicon Valley. Then they expanded. They opened a branch in Czech Republic. So we have all our tech operations in the Czech Republic, and like the marketing, the sales, they are all located in Silicon Valley because that's where they are.
So what type of company did they found? Pharmaceuticals?
No. Because I'm not working in the pharmaceutical area. I was working in Portugal, but I was working at a pharmacy, but I was not happy there, so I just quit the job and I wanted to go abroad. And actually I had an opportunity in some Czech startup, which is not the same that I am in today. I started doing mostly technical support, kind of an entry-level position. But then I gained interest in the job. I started learning more about web development and programming in general, and then I became a software tester, which is what I do now.
You mean a software tester that gets a steady paycheck, a steady salary?
Yeah.
Because I thought they usually do give those software testing jobs to Indians or Pakistanis.
No. We have like QA departments, steady QA departments. It's a common practice. I mean, some companies use like some contractors or whatever you want to call it. But now it's more and more common that companies are embracing this practice of having a QA department.
Interesting. Because I thought it's more cheaper.
Because the kind of testing that I do is kind of technical. It's not just go there and clicking around, because you can ask a couple of Chinese or Indians or whatever or you can put, because there is a website online. It's kind of a gig, because if you want to be a tester or beta tester, you can enroll yourself there and you can get some contact to test some websites, some application, and so on. But what we do is we do have this more manual testing, but we also have automated testing at the whole testing infrastructure. So it can become quite technical and quite complex. And the way that testing is being conducted now especially in these startups, in this modern way, the so-called agile way, it's much more of a continuous testing. It's not just like, okay, you've shipped this whole functionality or this whole application, okay, send it to some testers, like to some to some contractors, to some outsourced. It's I mean, some companies still do that, but it's getting less and less popular, that practice, I believe, because it's more they are adopting, the companies, they are adopting testing more, and they are looking at testing and quality assurance as an integral part of their own software development life cycle. So it's more important. So it's not something that you can just outsource, because again, it's like building websites or design. You can get some outsourcing, some contractor to do some designing for you, some UX designing, some brand designing. I mean, some companies do that, but more companies, they want to, expand their teams, and they have multidisciplinary teams that can cover many areas. But of course, depends of what is your size, how much money do you have, but it's...
I think the analysis you did on the Czech Republic was fairly more comprehensive than mine, because I always imagined the reason why the Czech Republic is attractive is simply because it's sort of, I think it really appeals to the Germans especially, right? Because it's close, it has cheap beer, and nice looking women, right?
Yeah,
So you combine that, you have quite a good situation going on.
Yeah, indeed. Well, actually, it was a shock that I found in Lithuania. I found the beer to be decent, better than I expected, but it was so expensive. I was like almost a little bit outraged. And then I went to some supermarket, tried to buy some beer, but they said, sorry, you cannot buy beer after 8 o'clock. It's like, oh, okay.
Oh, what's the situation in the Czech Republic?
I mean, you can buy beer pretty much whenever you want.
Really?
Yeah.
They don't have any restrictions on the time?
No. I think they have some restriction in what regards to drinking in public.
Yeah.
Theoretically, but it's like, I don't know how to which degree it is enforced or not. Because some countries, they are very strict. For example, I remember I was in Estonia, my friend was telling me, hey, beware that you cannot just go there, buy some beer and be around, walking around drinking. In Lithuania, I guess they have that too. I don't know, how is it in Latvia? Do they have?
Well, technically, I think you cannot go outside in public, but if you are, let's say, in a pub, it's no big deal. Right? Yeah. And at least in the store, you can buy after 10. That's I don't think we had that forever, but it's been a long time that way.
But I've heard also, because I have a Lithuanian colleague, that she said that in Lithuania they have a major problem with alcoholism.
I was surprised
and that is
about
related to the reason why they have such high suicide numbers. Because I thought, why is it so high?
Well, if you ask me, the reason they have such a high suicide rate is that because it's Lithuania, right? I mean, when you look at it in a pragmatical way, you don't have a big industry, you don't have anything really going for you. Now you have two options: whether you dig down and start making something, or you just start drifting. You just start maybe gambling, using alcohol, getting into different sorts of negative behaviors, right? And it's not a problem for Lithuanians only. I mean, Latvians have quite a few problems, I think,
but it's not as high as Lithuania, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know why it's specifically in peak numbers, specifically Lithuania. I'm not sure about that.
But I know that there used to be a problem I believe in Sweden or Denmark. They also used to have, I believe it was Sweden, a few years ago. They had a huge rate of suicide. I think now it's not the case, but I believe in the 90s or the 80s. They had, and I mean, they've been a wealthy country pretty much ever since.
Look, it's difficult to tell how it was in 30 years ago, but it's definitely the case that nowadays one of the most industrially advanced countries, Japan, has critical suicide numbers. But then again, it's Japan. It's not really Western, is it? It's more or less. I don't know. What do you think about other countries outside the European realm? Let's say America, England, Europe.
Well, I'm a little bit politically incorrect, but America seems to me that is a society in decay. It's completely decadent.
Yeah, decadent. Yes.
And when you see the latest political developments there, I mean, it's complete decadence, cultural decadence. You can see that it's. Did you know? I mean, you mentioned India. I don't know. Are you interested in India, or do you know?
Simply because it's a low-hanging fruit.
No,
I think
but
for digital content, India is a low-hanging fruit.
I mean, they are famous because there is like some slums in India because there is like enormous wealth. And there is like
Slumdog Millionaire.
Yeah. The slums, and there is like some areas where they don't even have basic hygiene. They are open areas of defecation. But you can say, okay, it's India. It's kind of developed, but on the other hand, they have some areas which is completely third world because most of the population is still very poor. But it's not the same situation in America, in the United States, right?
Well, it's in certain parts. It is.
Apparently, it is because in San Francisco, California.
Yeah, they have the poop map, right? They have the street map.
Feces,
yeah.
It's completely and there's
it's so funny.
But it's huge influx of illegals there. It's like completely.
But it's exactly the opposite, right? Because it's not out of poverty. It's because of the big wealth that's attracting also Well, could you actually call homeless people parasites of society in a certain context?
Well,
I think you could.
I don't know.
I
don't
think
know.
you could, because the reason
Depends
why
on the circumstances.
the reason why San Francisco has a lot of poop on the streets is because homeless people are getting some free stuff, right?
Exactly.
And just pooping. It's
Yeah.
not really that they have to work that much. The weather is good. The neighborhood is quite wealthy, so a lot of spoils get their way. And now you have
I believe maybe because of, I don't know, maybe the American dream, because I've watched some documentary a few years ago, and some people that were homeless in, San Francisco, Los Angeles area, they went there a few years ago because they wanted to become a star, to get into the entertainment industry, and they failed and they got into debt, and they lost their house, and they were just living on the street.
in Los Angeles. Are you sure?
Yeah.
That would be weird. Imagine you go to a city to become famous and you end up homeless.
Yeah, but people, they are very, very naive. We have to understand, because maybe you guys
but that's I don't think that if you are becoming, let's say you want to become a movie actor, you go to Los Angeles and it doesn't really work out, the first thing you would do is go into porn or something like that. You wouldn't just become homeless.
Not all of them there. Some of them, I don't know, resort to porn or prostitution. But even if they go to porn or prostitution, they can be exploited. They can get into drugs, because even if you if you start doing drugs, you get a disease. They don't even invite you. Not even good enough for porn. You'll end up in the street.
That's a given that most of them will be quite gullible. That's for sure. But then again, is it really that bad? Because it's just a symptom, right? It's not really a cause of anything. It's just a symptom of the wealth.
There is other symptoms, because in Middle America, or the Rust Belt states, there is a huge problem with opiates, because they used to be an industrialized society, and we were just mentioning Lithuania and all the issues that they have. And there used to be heavily industrialized. And they got a major deindustrialization, because all the industries, they went overseas, and the people lost their jobs, and they got the same problem. They had nothing to do. What did they do? They drinking, gambling, getting into drugs, getting addicted, and there is a huge problem.
Yeah, but see, the only difference is most of it's at least legal, because they use prescription drugs.
Yeah. But I mean, it's
I don't know.
Still,
I think don't you think that?
But
don't you think that a liberal country should allow its citizens to medicate themselves to death if they want to? When should a government step in and say no, you shouldn't use that?
But if you have some NHS or some form of, because you can say you can medicate yourself to death, but then who's going to take care of them? Because if they're going to your NHS or to your Medicaid or whatever they call it, it's going to be a burden on the state.
Well, it is a burden on the state either way you look at it. Once a person is living and dying, it's still a burden to society to some extent. It's not like somebody could carry their weight all the way from birth to death. At some point in their lives, mostly in the initial years and in the last years, they have to rely on other people.
Yeah, but we cannot overlook, other aspects such as the ethical and the moral aspect. Because, you can say, in the early years, they're kind of a burden, and in the later years, but through the most of their life, they would become, productive citizens. They would work, they would pay taxes, they would help the country progress. If you go through this logic in a very orthodox manner, they say, well, everyone is a burden. Just let them all die. Replace them with robots.
But it goes the other way around, because if somebody wants to be super productive, they are allowed to. It's a matter of whether or not you want to actually aspire that type of life, that you are really, really productive. Or maybe you just want to...
people, they are really productive.
Or maybe you just want to use drugs legally and shoot guns. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
If you have the means to do it, who is the government to tell you shouldn't? Right?
Yeah.
Even though it's not...
But now they want to ban the guns. They want to get rid of the Second Amendment.
No, they don't.
They do.
Where do you get your information, man?
No, I watch a lot of American news.
It's the it's the almost birthright of the Americans.
They don't. I mean,
they
the
don't
Americans they don't want to
play
lose
around
their
with it. They don't play
their
around
Second
with it.
Amendment, but some politicians they want to get rid of it.
Don't get me
Because
wrong.
of the violence.
There always have been some people who would like the stricter controls and maybe even ban some type of weapons. There's always the case, but it's not the majority to no extent. Because think about it this way: I think America has more guns than people.
Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Maybe you're not counting the illegals. Maybe if you count the illegals, it's kind of more.
Yeah. So it's totally a different ball game because when you think about it, it's probably the same, I guess, in Portugal as in the rest of Europe. It's not so easy to get a gun.
Yeah.
And to have a
You
gun,
have to
right?
have permit. You have to be fit to have a gun. Yeah, I saw a
See,
documentary
we are
that
not
was
used. We are not
even
used to
selling guns on eBay. You can just go to some random guy online. Okay, I want to buy some weapon, and it's like not just a pistol. Huge assault rifles, which is kind of strange for me as a European. But yeah, I guess that's how it works there, and they're used to it.
Because guns would be probably okay if the owners would be sort of restricted to use some type of substances, right, or medications. Because then it gets tricky. If you alter your consciousness with some medications, let's say you take prescriptive drugs for, I don't know, depression or whatever, and then on top of that you have access to some rifles, I think that
don't they have
point.
some background checks or some drug tests?
That's why that's why they
That's
are
what they had.
so that's why so they confused about the whole situation, because in one sense, yes, access to guns is totally almost unrestricted. I mean, you probably have to have some paper, but it's quite easy, right? On the other hand, they definitely know that not everybody would be fit to use a gun, right? But they still don't have a solution to that, at least on a federal level. Maybe
Well, it's quite difficult to get into a consensus there.
I think on a state level it depends, because I think New York has strict gun laws or some regulations.
Yeah, wasn't that Rudy Giuliani who did some change?
Might be.
Because I've heard that he did some laws on crime and on surveillance there.
Yeah.
The famous stop and frisk was during the 80s or 90s, because there used to be a lot of criminality in New York, a lot of, I believe, even gun violence in New York. And then it improved greatly thanks to these measures. That's what I heard. I've never been there, but I've heard actually from some American colleague.
I have two thoughts on these things. One, that type of violence is always correlated to the amount of wealth that is present. The more richer people, the more violence and criminality around them. And second is, once everybody has been accustomed to smart devices like smartphones, tablets, and so forth, crime rates probably will go down just rapidly.
Maybe cybercrime will rise.
Cybercrime might, yes, but other than that, I mean, think about it this way: once people are hooked on their telephones or on their smartphones, right, they don't really have to bother with acting violent. They just put their violence into Twitter and
But
YouTube.
now they
YouTube
cannot
comments.
even put it there because they get censored deplatformed now.
Yeah, well, that's
Regulation.
a strange thing, because in a sense, those companies are private, right? Most of the time, they are just private companies, entities, and then again, it's so public that it gets really
they
strange.
are private, but Merkel was pressuring Facebook and Twitter to crack down on the dissident speech, quote unquote.
Look, it makes for a good headline, but I don't know if it really translates.
She was
but I don't know.
corresponding with them.
Yeah, but I don't know how well it translates into actual results. Because if you think about
Facebook, I can give you
it's a business model.
Some kind of interesting information. In the last few years, I noticed a surge on jobs for content moderators everywhere. Normally, because I remember when I was starting to look for jobs, like jobs for international people, it mostly is like what you're even a technical person, so you'll do some, I don't know, software development or accountant or something related to finance. Or if you are more entry level, it would be like call center stuff, technical support. But now there is a huge job market for content moderators because they are investing a lot, these huge companies, Google, YouTube, Twitter, on content moderators, which is basically censorship, good old censorship.
But how would it play out if you are a content moderator? What would be your daily
I guess
duties?
I don't know. I never worked
just to check whether.
But
or not
from what I saw, is that basically there is algorithms, and there's not only people who flag, so you can see post as inappropriate, you can flag it, you can denounce it. But there is also, I believe, some algorithms. I don't know how exactly they work. Probably based on
they get flagged.
NLP or something.
Probably.
And they can get automatically flagged.
Probably.
And probably they get sent to reviewers. Some reviewers decide to censor it. Some others, I don't know, decide to restrict it. But yeah,
I think Twitter is the most flexible when it comes to that, right? Still, even though they... Do you know the dude, if you say that you consume a lot of American content, do you know Alex Jones?
Yeah, he was completely deplatformed.
Yeah, well, sort of, because nobody can shut his website down, right? He still has his own website at least. I mean, because they still continue to produce.
I saw some websites. I've heard some websites were taken down because they even went to the domain administrators and they just got their domain. Not Alex Jones, some other.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Because that is the least they can still have, their own domain. Other than that, yes. I mean, YouTube kicked them off, Twitter.
I think he was even kicked out of PayPal. They removed his account. His PayPal account.
That might be. So what do you think of that?
Well, I mean, he's an American. He should be protected by the First Amendment. But that sounds to me that it's like against the First Amendment. I mean, it's a private company, you can argue, but that's kind of the public space. Because as you just mentioned, people are more and more engaged with their, electronic devices, computers, tablets, smartphones. I mean, the internet, the social networks, they are the new public space. They are the new public square. And if someone tries to censor it, because some people say, if you don't like it, it's just their decision. You can build your own Facebook or build your own Twitter. But it's not so easy. I mean, there is some dissident platforms such as Minds, Gab, but even those platforms, they have it really difficult to enter into the market because Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, they become such huge monopolies that it's really difficult to break them up. And plus they have all their tax subsidies and so on. And even on these so-called dissident or alternative networks, it's very often that people start spreading in the news, this platform is just for extremists or Nazis or this or that, and then they get, censored because, so it's not so easy. It's not an honest system.
I always wondered how pedophiles organize themselves. Because you every once in a while you hear in the news, a pedophile ring got
That's what there was one in Latvia recently, right?
I don't know.
I think I saw some news, that the Latvian police busted up some...
If you mention it, I sort of remember hearing about Imanta, that in a region of Riga, that there might be one or two. Maybe you mean that. I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
I remember hearing a couple of years ago.
No, I read a couple of weeks ago that they busted, I think, some online,
Let's just Google it, shall we?
Well, I guess for them, I don't know, maybe they use some, because now they have some encrypted services to message each other, I don't know. And the same for, these people, the criminals, the ones that sell guns and drugs online, You had this so-called deep web where they were selling all sorts of stuff, even organs. So I wouldn't be surprised that they would be engaging on this.
Well, I don't really think about organs as something surprising, right? Because yes, at some point somebody who has money needs some type of transplant, right? But when it comes to, yeah, well, I'm looking at Riga pedophilia. It's not in no specific news story, but yeah, just a couple of that. Yeah, somebody got caught, and
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Either way, but I'm confused because if you take somebody's method of organizing that is that effective, because most of the time that is, you could say, quite undercover, right? What they do. If you take that and apply it to another field, it's quite effective for different sorts of things. And so I've always imagined, how do they do that, and how to actually find out, right? Because you don't need to know the specific names and persons, but what do they do? How do they do their things to make it look, I don't know, like something else, and then how to apply that to, because just take that best practice, quote unquote, and put it in some useful thing.
Well, I don't know. But those illegal groups, gangsters, pedophilia, and so on, they have their own practices, to stay under the radar, to try to stay under the radar.
Because that's what BitTorrent not BitTorrent, Bitcoin, right? That's what the Bitcoin was many times all about. Just not funding, but allowing organized crime to transact.
I've heard about that. There was huge. I
each.
believe it was banned in China. Wasn't it banned in China? Or
Bitcoin?
they wanted to ban it in China
I think
they said criminals.
Hasn't China banned
terrorists,
everything?
They said.
In a sense, hasn't China banned everything?
Well, they censor everything. But hey, at least they're honest about it. They say, hey, this is censored, you can't watch this. While the United States, they sell themselves as a democracy. And the European Union wants to follow the same way.
Yeah, but
and then there is not really a democracy.
Look at it this way. I mean, once you have the President of the United States tweeting, and other people having the ability to actually make fun of him every day in all different kinds of platforms, you could say it's more freedom than the rest of most of the world.
Well, freedom for him.
No, I mean, if you are an American, right, you can publicly criticize your president and don't think about
it's
repercussions.
very much acceptable for them to criticize the president, because if you turn on the American media, they are criticizing the president 24/7.
Yeah, but try that nonsense in Turkey, for instance, right?
Well,
you get some visitors real quick. Real quick. And in China, that's the other thing. In China, they don't really even want to share their lifestyle with the rest of the world. They somehow think that the rest of the world will want to adopt their lifestyle, which is...
Do they?
Because as far as I understand, their mentality is, we have a lot of time, right? So it's not, we don't have to convince you, we don't have to conquer you, we don't have to do whatever to you. We have a lot of time.
Militarily, because they are conquering everything economically, because they buy everything.
Are they? I don't know.
They are.
I think it's.
They have the United States in their hands, because the United States have a huge debt to China. They are the global export leaders. Everything nowadays is made in China.
Let's delve into some historical trivia, right? When I think Nixon was president, he and Henry Kissinger went to China and basically arranged a deal where Americans could outsource some production facilities to China. And so that is considered the initial starting point of modern globalism, right? Now turn the clock 30 years later, and basically everything now is being produced in China. But the know-how, the intellectual property, most of the time the shareholders, they are not really Chinese. Many times it's still foreigners. And what they do is they try to steal as much as possible from the foreign companies to take the know-how, to take the commercial ability.
Clever.
In a way, but up until the point when some new generation of technology needs to be in place, because they don't invent. I don't think they invent anything. They just try to copy as effectively as possible and as cheaply as possible. Yeah. And I think it's almost a zero-sum game. Because think about it this way: if China would develop the market so ahead that it wouldn't be so cost effective for American or any other foreign companies to produce there, they would just go to, I don't know, India, for instance, and produce there. And so what about your world empire now, right? A lot of capital would just drain, I don't know how fast, but probably pretty fast. Because I always think about, let's say, India, Bangalore, it was just created because of the Americans. It wasn't like they had some know-how on the spot and then they attracted some more capital or something. No, just Americans picked almost a random spot on the map. Yeah, the weather is good. You can play golf there. Let's go ahead. All right. So and now it's almost a metropolis.
Well, yeah. India's economy has been growing a lot also.
And you mentioned that Portugal has a military base from the Americans.
Yeah, in the Azores. It's very
What do you think of my sort of fast made up theory that all the countries who have American military bases inevitably will advance economically? If you have an American military base, it means you are set.
I disagree. Well, we've had this American base for ages.
Well, after the Second World War?
Yeah, exactly. Or
so, is Portugal better off after the Second World War?
Nope.
Today.
Well.
See, I rest
it
my
was
case.
Certainly not because of the American bases. If anything, it was because of the
dictatorship, right?
Funds,
the dictatorship made
it
it
greatly hindered the country's development.
Why was it actually established? What was the
because there was a huge instability, and back it was in the 20s it was established, and there was already the specter of communism creeping in. So there was either the communists would take power or the fascists. So the fascists basically, or this dictatorial government with some fascistic traits, ended up gaining the power.
Yeah.
And I mean the country's economy was completely in shambles, and Salazar put it in order. At least the finances, the debt, it was controlled. We had quite a lot of, because with the Second World War we were kind of a joker. Because we had this old alliance with England, but also due to ideology.
What kind of old alliance with England?
This is an alliance that goes back to the, I believe, 14th or 13th century. That started with some Prince of Portugal being married to some Princess of England. And it's we've been in an alliance ever since. It's
really
one of the oldest military alliances in the world. Indeed. For example, when we were invaded by the French in the early 1800s, Napoleon, the English were the ones who helped us get rid of them. The English were the ones who helped defeat them and drive them away, and they were actually kind of involved in some transition government during this period during and after the French occupation.
But the British don't drink as much wine as the Portuguese, right?
No, I don't think so. I guess they prefer beer, but they do appreciate Portuguese wine, and they do appreciate the Portuguese coast and weather.
Because if you say you had an almost many centuries long alliance, seems to me it didn't really translate into the cultures being similar or getting more similar.
Not into trade.
Because when it comes to the Germans and the French, they have definitely influenced the English.
Yeah. No, we didn't have so much influence. I mean, I guess the English were the strongest one in this relationship. I don't know, but I guess we didn't have so much influence. I mean, we did have some influence from them more than they did have from us. But back to what I was saying. So there was this, this alliance with England. We were part of the Allied forces during the First World War. We fought for the Allies in the First World War, but when the authoritarian regimes, Italy, even Spain, Franco, and of course Germany, there was some ideological affinities with Germany, and there was a huge propaganda operations by the Germans in Portugal. So they tried to become very friendly with the Portuguese, a lot of cultural exchange, tried to get some trade with Portugal, because we also had some minerals that they could mine, like uranium and wolframium and so on, that they were interested in, of course, also because of the naval bases. So there was a lot of kind of grooming by the Germans.
And the colonies, right?
And the colonies, of course, because they were eager to get some colonies for themselves, I guess. And there was a lot of espionage from the Germans and also from the Allies in Portugal. There was a lot of espionage going on there. The dictatorship, they capitalized. We managed to get a lot of gold, even German gold. During those years, so we had a huge gold reserves.
Portugal?
But we did have, we had quite significant gold reserves.
So where did you leave them?
When the democracy, when we transitioned to democracy, all the gold was gone. I don't know what happened, it vanished. Well, I don't know. But yeah, we did have this, but still the population was very poor. And then gradually in the 50s or late 50s, early 60s, we really started to develop the country a little bit, to invest some infrastructures, mainly in the cities, because outside of the cities we're still poor. I mean, we did have some rail infrastructure that we still have till this day, and now it's being abandoned.
Why?
But because the governments, they don't care about it. I mean, it's completely if you go to Portugal, there is a huge contrast. You have the littoral, and especially the big cities such as Lisbon, Porto, Coimbra, or the Algarve region. There's a lot of investment there, a lot of people there. And then the interior, it's completely desert. There is almost no people living there.
Just farmers, right?
Very few, because we barely have any agriculture nowadays.
So how do you sustain yourselves?
Imports. This is why our national debt is huge. And now tourism, the tourism bubble.
Yeah, but there's always, right? Tourism is such a big income stream, right?
It is for us nowadays.
Portugal should be really, really wealthy if you think about it.
It should, but
it
we don't have
nice
proper
location.
fisheries. We used to have fishery and agriculture back in the times of the dictatorship.
Yeah.
So we actually did not have such a bad economy.
So wait a second, maybe you will be the guy who will copy the Czech dudes who went to Silicon Valley and then brought back some know-how to Czech. Maybe you will go to Czech Republic and bring some know-how back to Portugal.
I don't know. I don't think they will accept it. No, it's complicated, because in Portugal, maybe you are not aware of it. We had the huge waves of migration back then during the dictatorship, because people were really poor. A lot of people were going into France, some into Germany. Luxembourg is like the Portuguese colony, because if you go to Luxembourg, there is so many Portuguese people there. It's like Portugal, little Portugal, yeah. Also to the UK and the United States and Canada. And recently, with the recent crisis in the late 2000s, a lot of people started fleeing the country. I believe that Latvia has a similar problem, at least lately, because a lot of young Latvians left, right? They went mostly to Germany,
Great Britain,
UK, yeah.
Some people go to Sweden, some go to Germany, some go to Ireland, but I think most of them go to Great Britain.
But I've heard that the Latvian population has been steadily declining. They used to be over 2 million in the early 2000s. Yeah. Now they are just below. They're like 1.9 million.
My guess would be 1.8. Yeah.
And what is the government's position on this? Are they trying to bring them back? Are they not?
Well, look at it this way. Compared to, let's say, America, I think we have pretty great social benefits for having families. But I don't know the reason why the demographic would be declining, other than that people are not they're not highly qualified, right? And the unskilled labor market is poorly reimbursed. I mean, look at it this way.
But I think even skilled labor, because I just saw a report from the Latvian broadcaster recently that some medical interns, the residents, so I have like 5 or 6 years of medicine studies, they were working there, they were doing the shifts, they were working their internship, and they were getting like 400 euros. To the extent that they even had to work part-time in, you know, McDonald's or somewhere like as a barista to complement their income. Doctors.
Might be the case, but sounds highly unlikely that they were doctors. But when you speak about students or some people who still get their degree or something like that, might be the case.
Well, they were like they were like in this phase that they were doing like their internship, so it's like kind of almost finished, but they were really.
Because I remember speaking to not just Australians and Americans, but also Germans, right? And it's really a big contrast between our average salaries and theirs. It's really a big contrast. If you speak about, let's say, a regular civil servant in Latvia, if you get 1,000 euros, what's it called?
After taxes?
After taxes?
Net.
Yeah, net. Then you are really almost above the average pay grade, right? If you get 1,000 euros in Germany per month,
you are below the poverty line.
You are a poor person. You are a poor person.
Yeah.
And that's the weird thing, because to be a civil servant, you would have to be with a high education and some form of qualification, right? But in Germany, to get 1,000 euros, you just probably have to clean windows.
Yeah. And now, how is the situation in terms of the economy here? Is it growing? Is it contracting?
I think it's growing mostly due to increasing government debt. That would be my guess. That would be my guess.
I know that you guys had some problems with the banks. Just recently, I read that another bank was involved with some scandals, some money.
Well, look at it this way. Other than a couple of banks, most banks in Latvia were almost specifically founded for that purpose of transferring money from east to west, from west to east. It's just once the Soviet bloc crumbled, many people needed a way to actually establish some form of accounting, let's say, optimization, right? And so the border states of the Baltics were quite suitable to use banks. So it wasn't different back in the 90s or early 2000s. It's just that now, since we are 15 years into the European Union, since we are sort of becoming more European and more civilized, right? The Western world would expect us to behave more, right? But it's just.
Well, we had also huge corruption scandals in the banks, and the state.
I mean, that's why
plays along with it. They inject money to the banks, and it's just a huge pit. You put money there and it just disappears.
What's your opinion regarding the past 12 years after the financial crisis? Have most governments learned from it?
No. And I believe we are on another bubble. And I think, I'm not an economist, but I predict there will be another major crash. I was actually predicting that it should have happened already, but I guess, because it was quite long. I remember, I don't know if you remember, but we felt it in Portugal. There was a kind of a crash in the early 2000s after the dot-com bubble, and mostly after the 9/11. I don't know coincidence or not. Because there was like some huge companies going bankrupt in the United States and busting, and the Portuguese economy suffered quite a lot. And then we kind of got ourselves, recovered a little bit. And then in the late 2000s, there was the subprime mortgage crisis and the huge financial meltdown, and our economy completely crumbled. It's funny that I don't know about Latvia, but in Portugal is that if the US economy is falling, our economy will suffer for sure. But if the US economy is thriving, it's not necessarily that our economy will thrive. We can thrive, we cannot, but if they are falling, we will for sure be affected.
Well, but that is the whole mantra. It used to be a corporate motto to say that you have to privatize profits and socialize losses.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look at it this way. It's not really bad unless people get really hurt, right? It's not bad that your, let's say, asset, let's say you have a mansion. It's not bad that your mansion could be sold on one day for $1 million and the next day for only 700,000. It's not really that bad. You still have the mansion,
Yeah, exactly.
right? You still have the asset. But when people lose their jobs and then they don't know how to actually survive, then it gets tricky, because it's not really that wealth was being destroyed during the crisis. It was just mostly transferred, right? Because
Exactly.
paper assets are paper assets, but real assets and hard assets and cash and capital, it's all
Just being transferred,
Still,
because it's like
still.
at least in Portugal, in the southern countries, Portugal, Spain, Greece, and so on. It's like the assets from the work, from the human capital, from the work capital, they were being transferred. So there was less jobs, there was less employment, salaries were falling, and now, but the financial industry kept, absorbing everything, the financial assets, the speculation.
yeah.
And that's what also drove our countries to political crisis, especially like what you saw in Greece. There was huge problems there.
How did they solve it?
Well,
what did
I
they
don't know
do?
how-
I don't know.
I think that the
I
whole
don't know what they
migrant thing,
did.
they got a lot of aid from the European Union. I don't know if they managed to revitalize their economy. I guess they did some reforms, some tough reforms.
Look, man, I'm not the one to preach, right? But I would say for Portugal, Spain, south of France, Italy, Greece, probably some other countries, maybe Bulgaria, I don't know. The only type of business should be just to accommodate tourists. That's the only way you should go, guys, consider your daily lives about. Just accommodate as much tourists as possible.
Well, it's
From
becoming
all
like
over
that.
the world. No, but look at it this way. You have your assets already from the get-go. You have nice weather. You have all the prerequisites to just build massive people attractions, right?
Yeah.
And if people come, it means everything else will follow. Culture will follow, money will follow.
Not
everything that
necessarily.
you
I mean,
want.
if you go to Thailand is a huge resort. They get millions of tourists.
It is, but it
And
is
it's a
also.
poor country.
but
Croatia
now
gets
we are-
millions of tourists.
But now we are
Still-
back to the pedophile topic again, I guess, because Thailand is specifically that way it is because they have the Buddhist, I guess, the ideology, right? And so all those sexually deviant Europeans and Westerners can go to Thailand and just have a blast and not get punished and not sit in prison.
Well, there is. I've heard about this, but I don't know.
I think that's why Thailand is popular in the first place. Yes, it has great climate, but so does Southeast Asia in general.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The Southeast Asia, not only Thailand, all those countries.
Well, I don't know how many people go to, I don't know, let's say Vietnam. I know it's sort of a thriving economy, but a tourist center is, I think, only Thailand.
I think Vietnam also
Oof.
more popular. I think maybe not as popular, but yeah, it's getting. I think recently because
I think the lady boys make the difference in that one.
the lady.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. Yeah, but again, they have the assets, the lady boys, and
Yeah,
still
that's their
they
competitive
are
advantage. That's
very
their
much,
competitive advantage.
underdeveloped.
Yes, but
So-
but see, at least the Thailand people know their strengths, right?
Yeah.
They know how they can compete.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting way of competing, but I guess you have to make do with what you have. Yeah, of course, there is some could be some moral or ethical implications, but I guess that can be subjective because, as you say, they have some different culture, different religion, so they they see it in a different way. I guess.
I don't know. I think most of the time when you talk about Asians and money, it's pretty straightforward. Make as much money as possible any way it's possible. Don't get caught if you are cheating. I think the mentality is totally different. If we let's say as Europeans would like to have some type of business that might be shady, we would at least make something up to not be too blatant about it.
Yeah.
But I think not the Asian people. Maybe I'm too generalizing, but still, many times when I've encountered Asian people, they are really just straight ahead. It's not. It's
That's
no.
why
It's
when
no
you
real.
saw, well, maybe that explains because
zigzag.
whenever I see some Facebook weird posts, some people they go there and put some spam. Oh, you want to earn money or this or that, some shady business you can clearly see. Or also, for example, in comment sections, you go to some newspaper, you see the comment section, and sometimes there is some person, hey, make money from home and this and that. And most more often than not, it's like Asian looking people. I don't know if it's like just fake profiles or there's like real profiles, because I know also that a few years ago when there was like some bot farms to generate like likes in Facebook and Twitter followers, they were doing it, I believe, in I don't know if it was in like India or Thailand or something. It was in Asia that they were.
If you ask me, India will take over Facebook. I think Facebook now is totally flooded with Indians, but they will get more and more and more because Chinese will have their own. I don't WeChat or something like that. What type of?
By the way, what is the biggest network here in Latvia? Is it Facebook?
Yeah.
What about VContact? Is it a thing?
The Russian one?
Yeah.
Well, maybe the Russian-speaking people use it, but they probably use it side by side with the Facebook one. Exclusively, the Russian one, I think only in Russia. I think only in Russia. Because even Russians use Facebook. Right? See, it's a big difference because the new generation of Russians, they will get more and more accustomed to the Western style of lifestyles, right? Whereas the Chinese, they still want to have their own.
Yeah.
I mean, my relative is now studying in China, and I didn't speak to him directly, but I talked to his family, and yeah, they told that basically nothing that we use on a day-to-day basis is there, but they have their own versions of it. Basically, you don't use Google, you use something similar. You don't use WhatsApp, you use, I think it was WeChat. And the WeChat is also used as Facebook. It's also used as PayPal. It's also used as what have you. So they have their own version. Now, of course, you cannot be sure how much of your actions are monitored, right? But it's pretty clear that it's not that flexible as it would in the West, right?
Yeah.
So you say that you don't consider that there have been lessons learned from the crisis?
No, I don't think so.
Would you have a positive and optimistic outlook for the future when it comes to the wealth of nations?
No.
Really?
No. I'm very pessimistic.
But
because we have to account to something that people always talk markets up and down and so on. It's the boom and bust cycle, but we have to take into account the resources, the finite resources. The world population keeps increasing. The resources, they are not increasing, they are decreasing. And when you run out of resources, natural resources, we don't have water, when you don't have, food, enough food to feed the world, what are you going to do? You're going to eat money? You're going to eat assets? I guess you can't.
But see, the funny thing is, these same arguments were made, I think, more than 150 years ago. It's really interesting to see that most of the wealth building and wealth destroying arguments are almost the same throughout the past. Well, basically throughout the time period after the Industrial Revolution. It doesn't really change. So once something as automation comes in or artificial intelligence, so the argument is, it will create so much unemployment, people will be out in the streets. Exactly the same as it was in the 19th century when they invented some type of wool machine that basically reduced the number of workers needed, right? And everybody said, well, it will create such unemployment that people will be out.
Well, it did create
poverty.
there's
always definitely a transition period, but I don't get it. People are living, as far as I can tell, people are better off than any time in history.
Oh,
I
so
mean,
far theoretically, yes, in terms of
except if they
material.
don't have smartphones. If you see somebody without a smartphone, you know, oh, they're probably poor, or very, very idealistic, because there are still people who actually
But the thing is, the people are more and more.
protest smartphone use, right? Because it
Yeah.
takes up too much time.
But if you think about it, this system, you can say, okay, it's the most. This is the highest standard of living in history. So it seems, but I think people are highly reliant on the system, and that the system can sustain itself. But in order for the system to sustain itself, it needs some resources. And if the air becomes unbreathable because it's more and more pollution, if we run out of water, if we run out of food, or there is not enough food for the population, I mean, what are we going to do? How are you going to engineer your way out of it?
See, that's a mathematical question, right? But nobody can give you an answer. What will be the threshold? I mean, it used to be the case that people were saying that the world is overpopulated when the world population was around 1.5 billion people, right? Now it's 8 billion people, and people have been talking about overpopulation since the early 90s.
This is why you see huge slums. I mean, there's areas of not Europe, but in Asia, in South America, there is huge slums because there is. I mean, we are having very good standards of living.
Yeah.
But those people, they are living in absolute misery.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If you speak about them, I would guess most of the time it's more related to the skills and knowledge they would have to possess to change something. Because see, if you are isolated and you are born into a slum, it's almost inevitable that you only know your slum, and that's about it. So the intellectual potential that is there in that one spot is the thing that you probably will absorb, and that's about it. Take this device, give it to some young person in the slums, and now he has access to the information of the world, right? I would say, mathematically speaking, it's highly unlikely that it would stay the same for the slum during his lifetime. I think once you give them the chance to, get the information, get the education, get the know-how, it's almost inevitable that at least 1 out of 1,000 or 10,000 people will make the needed difference to actually improve that type of environment as well.
Can I ask you, how is the education in Latvia? Because I see that some foreign students, they come here to study, I believe it's medicine.
Mostly.
Is it that good? How would you describe it?
I think mostly the people who come here to study, they are looking for cheap education.
But is it that cheap here?
Well, it's cheaper. Of course, yeah. I mean, it's cheaper and it's more accessible for some people. So Scandinavian, German people come here to study and then I guess go back because
but quite a few Portuguese, they are also coming here, but it's
really?
So that the tuition fees are much higher than in Portugal.
I would imagine, yes.
Yeah.
So how
much are the tuition fees here? Isn't it like 5,000 euros a year or more?
Well, that would be the upper range. 5,000 per year would be upper range. Medium would be probably around 2,000, yes, per year. Yes. And
still higher
and
than
Finnish
Portuguese.
people, for instance, don't have to pay nothing, right?
Neither do Czech people. They
Really?
have education for free. Yeah.
So how come? Well, what is the business that we should know of that comes from, except Škoda, from the Czech Republic?
Red Hat.
What's that?
Red Hat, it's like some technology systems, like some technology. I think they are related to kind of operative systems and so on. Like, I guess it's more for corporations.
Yeah, because
well, I can tell you
to
a startup that started in Brno, second city of the Czech Republic, Kiwi.com.
Kiwi?
Kiwi.com, yeah.
The one who makes those numbers? The number tickets?
Yeah.
Oh.
For the flight tickets, yeah, Kiwi.com. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. And so the founder is Czech?
Yeah, it's Czech. It's based out of Brno. They have offices also in Ukraine, I think in Spain or something like that. Yeah, because they really grew a lot.
All right,
Yeah.
all right. So what are your plans actually? Now you are in the Czech Republic. Do you plan to stay there?
Well, I don't have any plans. I wanted to leave since last year, but instead of leaving, I ended up in Prague because I was in Brno. But I'm not such a fan of the city. But I would like to move eventually. I've been thinking about moving to Poland or to the Baltics, Riga, mainly. I did look for a job back then, in the summer, but I wasn't lucky. I mean, spoke to some companies in Latvia, but the pay was really low, much lower than I was getting there. It's like I was not sure if I should come here. So yeah, I haven't been actively looking. That's something that I would like to maybe consider, because I would love to have an experience here in Latvia, in Riga, because I really like the city, and seems like there is good quality of living. Okay, the winters are quite rigorous, I understand that, but I guess that's part and parcel of it. If not, also Poland, because culture is closer to the Czech Republic. Linguistically, also I've been even learning some Polish, so I guess it would be more facilitated for me as an expat to integrate there. But also Latvian, and I'm really thinking about starting learning a few words of Latvian.
What about going back to Portugal?
No, because there is not much opportunities there. There's just tourism and...
You need to create those opportunities, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, but the problem is the culture there, because they don't foster this innovation. Maybe here they do foster. I mean, in Czech Republic they do, but in Portugal, their mentality.
I guess.
Just
if I had to guess, I would say that the Portuguese are more inclined to be conservative, on a broad spectrum. But would you
certain things?
Would you say that's not really an issue, because your generation and the next generation won't be that way. It's just a matter of time, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, but the problem is that the status quo is, and the mentalities there are too difficult to change, and it's like there is a lot of the problem, I think, with the Portuguese economy and why it's not competitive is that, like you say, we have resources, tourism, and we can build a huge stream of income from the tourism industry, and we can even attract like some services there and so on. For example, Ireland, they had some major economical recovery because they had a huge crisis, and they recovered almost miraculously. So they are now doing very well, the Irish economy. But I guess that's the mentality, because we have a lot of cronyism. We don't. I guess everywhere. They don't care so much about meritocracy. Just a lot of cronyism here and there, especially in the big companies. And even if you try to innovate and to get into the economy, I mean, if you have some money, some wealth that you can invest, create your own company, and be somehow lucky, okay. But if not, it's very complicated.
So would you say that you are looking for actually jobs to be more related to new technologies, not tourism, not those traditional type of...
Well, I guess we can still have tourism, because we have a lot of potential there, and we can have a lot of income there, so this shouldn't be downplayed. But I guess we could be a little bit more innovative when it comes to technologies. I think now that it's starting to be a little surge, because there is starting to get more startups here and there. For example, Pipedrive, which is an Estonian startup, very well known. They have offices also in Lisbon, in Prague as well, but in Lisbon.
Pipedrive?
Yes.
What do they do?
They do because most of these companies, they just develop software. It's so-called software as a service. I think what they develop is like some solution for marketing or for sales. I don't know entirely.
What's your opinion about marketing and specifically digital marketing? Because you seem like a bright dude. You would be probably interested in making money the easiest way, right?
Well, in order to be good at digital marketing, depends. What are you going to do? Are you going to create content? Are you going to do SEO? Because I did work a little bit with marketing, because on my previous company I was also doing some content creation, and I was collaborating with our marketing department, and I was curious, so I learned a lot about marketing, some basic concepts and so on. But I guess to be successful in marketing is not that easy. I mean, maybe you can try to go all clickbaity and shady, but if you want to do it, some proper way and get some credibility, I guess you have to be really good and really professional.
Well, would you say that the real strategy for marketing, at least in the digital realm, has not really been written yet, because it's still evolving, right? I mean, how many years do we have these current most popular platforms? Probably like 5.
Yeah, I guess. But I guess in the tech world, especially in the software world, everything is always changing. New technologies, new trends here and there. So.
What is your opinion? Does it really matter nowadays that you might have some alternatives to Facebook? Isn't, let's say, Facebook in a position that it will probably be still around 5 years from now?
Well, I believe
because at one point it was the case that MySpace, right, was the biggest social network.
That was long ago.
Yeah. Well, and then they lost to Facebook, and now they're lost to.
Facebook is ever more regarded as a common channel, as a common platform. So the companies, they tailor their marketing strategies through this specific platform, such as Facebook or Twitter or even Instagram. You have some companies. Air Baltic has some Instagram, and they put there their photos and say, "Oh, look our new route," or "Look our new airplane," and this.
Do you use Instagram?
No, but I've seen some pages of this, and there is quite common,
What type of social networks do you use?
Well, mostly like LinkedIn for professional, and Facebook, YouTube to watch content. But they cater their marketing strategies. For example, SEO. When we talk about SEO, which stands up for search engine optimization,
It is really relevant nowadays.
It is relevant.
Are you sure?
Never. Yeah.
Because look at it this way. SEO was at one point in time almost the only effective method how somebody could find you, right? Because they had to somehow be interested, and then you could optimize the results.
But it's still very relevant.
But nowadays it's mostly either hashtags or the visibility of your different social media accounts. Right, and you don't even really need to have a comprehensive web page. Right?
No, that's not.
You have to have the clear message. You are the one for that particular thing, but you don't really have to have.
Well, depends on your business.
Own.
What are you selling? Maybe if you are selling, purses. I don't know. You just have to have some nice hashtag on Twitter or whatever. But if you are
because the
software
exposure
as a service, if you are a company and your target customers are other companies, B2B, then you have to build some reputation, some brand reputation.
That's what I mean, because SEO was usually passive in a sense that you do your SEO and you wait for the customer to find you, in a sense. Whereas nowadays, digital marketing would mean that you actually are constantly putting out some form of information, some content.
Recycling content.
You are seeking exposure as much as possible, and you try to target your active exposure to the audience that might be the most likely for your content.
The AdWords and so on. It's a huge battle for the SEO, I guess, for the SEO supremacy, because if you go there, for example, if you research some company, for example, if you research, if you research Airbnb on Google, the other day I was researching, and what do I got on top of the search results? Booking.com, because they put these AdWords, so when people search for the terms of their competition, they appear.
Let me just try that one.
I don't know if it's enabled in Latvia, because I guess it depends on the geographical region.
No, Airbnb.
Okay, not here. But the other day I tried. It was like on the top AdWords. It was.
Yeah, pretty cool. If they manage to do that, why not? Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
Booking.com, yeah,
See?
second one.
I mean,
Yeah, but pretty good, pretty good. And Booking.com is catching up with Airbnb.
but the thing is, you say, okay, you can put hashtags and so on, but if someone never heard of you,
Yeah,
and for example, you have the competition which is really strong, maybe if you appear as the second result,
yeah.
will be a huge exposure because yes, people are using a lot of Twitter, Instagram, and so on. But I mean, Google is still, the biggest platform because there's the go-to place,
I guess so. It's just, isn't it a matter of time when Facebook could take over? Because look,
I don't know.
I look at it like the Chinese model. The Chinese basically use one mobile app for almost everything, right? Because it has the functionality.
Mhm.
So imagine a situation where I think Facebook even had that type of option, but they didn't really implement it. Once Facebook would have transactions and selling options.
I think they do still have some selling options. It's called like Facebook Marketplace or so.
Yeah. Well, that's basically just seek and find the type of
Yeah.
situation. But if you can make up, Shopify, right?
Yeah.
If you could take that model and integrate it into Facebook. So if I make a Facebook page and I'm selling some stuff on that Facebook page, and you are buying it and transacting within that page.
Oh, that's a good point because I wonder why didn't no one launch any model like that?
Well, they have Facebook stores, but they don't work. The only reason why I registered on Facebook was that I participated in a project where everybody was communicating through Facebook, right?
Yeah.
So I begrudgingly registered, and then afterwards I saw, they have lots of options, and the best thing about it is that they have a massive audience. You could put out nonsense, and you could seek and find many people to get it, right? So I wanted to sell souvenir cards,
Mhm.
right? So I put up a page and
Yeah, those souvenir
saw-
cards that you had, the three,
and
you still sell them?
yeah, I still have some of them, and because I basically once the supply, since I think I have maybe 10 left.
Right?
Right?
But
But I
I
haven't
2 years ago. Yeah.
but I haven't reordered them, right? So
Mhm.
once the remaining
Mhm.
pieces are left, it's all good. So, but I made the page, and then I looked what are the options, and they had the option of having a store, but
Mhm.
it didn't function. It didn't attach to the bank account, right? Which means I couldn't get the money from the people who were visiting the Facebook page, but it had the functionality sort of present,
basic, yeah.
but it didn't work.
Was not
Maybe it works
functional.
in other countries. I don't know, but that definitely.
It sounds like a huge opportunity that is being wasted.
That's what I mean. Because Shopify is still around, but I think if Facebook would like to, they could eliminate Shopify in one night. Because you don't have. Imagine that if you could just make a Facebook page, attach your bank account to the Facebook store. That's it, and people can buy directly from Facebook.
Oh, maybe they just didn't have the drive to develop this further. But who knows in the future?
I don't know. Yeah. So you are saying that you are not planning of going back to Portugal then, huh?
No, but that's the common opinion of many people of my generation. They are away. By the way, what's the opinion of the Latvian expats? Because I saw that a lot of young people also left in the last few years. Are they thinking about returning? Not?
Those who earn a decent salary, they are quite sure that they won't come back to live here.
Mhm.
Maybe just visit, which would basically mean that they left for good. And of course, you have some people who would like to just save up some money there and then come back, right? But again, I don't think it's a smart game to play when your only decision to go there or not is based on whether or not you have the salary that is more attractive to you. Because the salary is just numbers in a sense, right? It's about the assets that you could get. If I could spend my money in Africa, I would probably do it in a heartbeat. Well, all those countries who have sort of a less advanced economy and against whose currency the euro is has a strong purchasing power. I would definitely like to spend my money there.
By the way, can I ask, why did Latvia switch to the euro? Because you used to have the lat as currency, which was stronger than the euro, right? So why did you guys switch to the euro?
It was pegged for a long time to the euro. It was pegged, so it was sort of already the euro.
Oh, okay.
They just switched to.
But didn't it used to be stronger than the euro at some point?
Well, I don't know. I think maybe in the early beginnings of the euro. I mean, the euro was created when 99. I think 99,
I think so.
and the physical.
But it started in
and
circulation in 2002.
2002, yes, the physical one.
I think it was agreed in the early 1990s, 93 or something, in the Treaty of Maastricht.
Yeah, the currency in general was in the 92 Maastricht Treaty, but in general, the 99, I think 99, the euro started becoming a sort of exchange currency in real, and then I think, 2002, when it really had the physical units shipped. And maybe at that point, but to be honest, I don't think a quote unquote strong currency is necessary. I don't see that as a prerequisite for anything that's economic. I just think that's more or less. It's maybe useful when you have isolated economies. Maybe then.
Well, Czech Republic has their own currency. It's way weaker than the euro, and they have been.
But I would guess that the overall general well-being of the Czech people is higher than the rest of Europe, at least the main.
I think
it's
better. It's better than in Portugal, I believe, or at the same level, maybe slightly higher. I mean, depends on the region, because if you go to the big cities, of course, and if you go to the smaller cities, there is not so much employment. So
the only economy I would be willing to just copy paste would be Switzerland. How they did it, it's a mystery to me. Because at one point in time they were just some small villages farming and milking cows.
And now they are one of the wealthiest nations.
Yeah, and isolated. They don't want to join the EU.
No.
For what?
They want to remain neutral in the wars, neutral in the.
Well, but that's really, really a big difference. Because I think that for them, the average salary is definitely like more 5,000 or 6,000 euros.
Is it?
It's really.
How much is the average salary here? I mean, not for the public, for the.
The average statistically, I would say, is maybe 800 to 900 euros. Cash. Not cash, but net.
And is the salaries matching with the cost of living? For example, if the cost of living goes up, does the salary go up too?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think more than 50% of the Latvian economy is in the gray zone, or somebody doesn't pay their taxes or something like that. I would say that's the biggest issue.
And what is the biggest source of income for the Latvian economy? Is it the banking system, tourism, industry?
Other than timber and agriculture, might be financial services. But again, it's not really how much the revenue is, it's how much the wealth gets distributed, I guess. So when it comes to that, it's probably the service economy. So lots of small services, tourism, including, yes. But other than that, because big companies in industries, they can make huge profits, but what do the common men and women get from it? Not much. Not much.
Yeah.
So I think it's all over the place. It's not. I don't think the Latvian economy is original in any way, shape or form.
Well, it's influenced like all of them.
Well, it would be cool if we would have something that's almost totally unique to us, right? But yeah.
By the way, I want to ask you, speaking of the economy, How or what do you know, or how do you define, or how do you describe the startup ecosystem in Latvia? Because I'm pretty sure you're aware of it. There is a huge hype around Estonia and the startups of Estonia, and there is like a huge amount of startups per capita, or one of the countries with the most startups per capita. I think the one with the most is actually Israel, but that's besides the point. And the whole residency. But I've learned recently that there are quite a few startups also surging in Latvia. How would you describe this?
Well, they made a law a couple of years ago specifically for startups. They had the intention to actually regulate the founding of businesses also in a more civil vein, but I don't think that they got through with that. But so yeah, we have a specific law for startups, which is and different other things, the institutions, incubators, state-funded incubators that are actually founded and working for the sole purpose of enhancing or allowing somebody to develop their business in Latvia. Yes.
Well, I don't know many Latvian startups. I know at least 2 or 3. I know LiveChat.
Look. If you
not LiveChat. Talk to. LiveChat is Polish. Talk to. There is one called Printful. There is related to T-shirts. There is, I believe, Ask FM. They started here or something like that.
Yeah, I think. But that was, I think, a native Russian speaker.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if the dude even speaks Latvian.
Really?
Yeah. Ask FM. Yeah. That I think he sold it. Some years ago. But yeah, he was from Latvia as a territory. When you look at the startups in general, I would say it's mostly related to modern IT technology, IT platforms, right?
Yeah.
So either it will be related to mobile phones or something along those lines. I don't know if I'm correct, but I would guess it's mostly a fad. Because if you have Silicon Valley that has more than, I don't know, 70 years probably of innovation, right? It's a pretty good bet to say that they will still continue to innovate, right? And the rest of the world will just try to implement it as fast as possible and maybe catch up. I don't know how Skype was started, but it usually is said that Skype is the biggest company started in Estonia, even though I think they started, generally speaking, in Sweden. I think just one of the founders was from Estonia.
Oh, that I didn't know.
I don't look. Let me just.
Because I always heard that.
Look it up.
Skype was Estonian.
I think it's overhyped. So Skype.
Well, speaking of overhyped, did you know that in Bulgaria they have a 10% flat rate?
Flat rate? For what?
Income rate.
10% income tax?
Flat.
That's low.
That's very low.
Yeah.
I'm surprised how didn't they get more investment? Because I read...
Because it's Bulgaria, man.
Well, but they are in the European Union.
Do you want to get robbed?
But they are in the European Union now, and they are...
Look, I don't know how they got in. I don't know how we got in, to be honest. Because I don't think we are still ready for a European Union level of living. I think the sort of the example of how European Union should function would be Germany, right? You have your troubles, you have your discussions or some shortfalls, but in general, it's a pretty sturdy, well-built machine, right? In a general sense, I don't know how the rest of us got in. To be honest,
the same could apply to Portugal and Greece, because I mean, they are very frail. Especially when we switch to the euro, because, for example, euro is a strong currency, so it's well adjusted to strong economy like Germany. But for countries like Portugal and Greece, they don't have such strong economies, so they suffer a lot with this.
So it says that it was founded in 2003. Two original founders. Just.
But do you think that Latvia would be better off if it was still not in the European Union? Or what's your opinion on that?
Also, basically, it was founded by several people. Some of them were Estonians.
Oh, okay.
And Janos Friis is Danish, and Niklas Zenström is Swedish.
Hmm.
Yeah, and some dudes were just Estonian.
I guess Estonia took the credit for it.
Well, I mean, it's not that they didn't do anything, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely wasn't a one-man show. So the question...
I was asking, do you think that Latvia would be better off if they were not in the European Union?
I don't think at all. I think if we wouldn't be in the European Union, we would be probably Belarus.
Like Belarus, yeah.
Well, in the sense that, yeah, we wouldn't be starving,
Mm-hmm.
but we wouldn't be nowhere near the level of comfort that we now enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I think Latvia and those countries like Latvia are only benefiting from the European Union. It allows us to not just travel, but to do business, to do many things that otherwise wouldn't be possible. Because now, since we are in the European Union, we are attached to the best economic circumstances the world has ever seen. Right? It might be crummy sometimes, it might be really shady sometimes, but it's still the best that the world has ever seen. We are once we joined, we are the 1%.
Well, I guess you can say so. And by the way, one thing that I wanted to ask you: do you have any stereotypes about your Baltic neighbors or neighboring countries? Because it's common that countries, they have some stereotypes there.
Well, look at it this way. Most of the time, the only stereotype that's being said about Estonians is that they are slower in everything that they do.
Really?
Well, it's sort of like a Finnish trait, right? Because Finnish people also seem more determined and more thinking about stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Other than that, I don't know of any specific stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
The only stereotype that Latvians say about Latvians is that we like to criticize each other too much, basically. But I guess that's also not really original, because I know the Germans say
Czech Republic, in Portugal, they say
the Germans say that about themselves. So
I guess that's a European trait. Because the people complain.
I just would like to see a comparison between some country that doesn't do it.
Maybe Switzerland.
I think the Swiss people, they criticize each other as well, quite a lot. But see, they have many different attributes that they just take for granted. I mean, I think nobody from Switzerland would like to live outside of Switzerland. Once they are accustomed to that type of life, no way.
It's difficult for them.
No way. Yeah, maybe traveling a bit, but it's totally different to a different level. So, 2 hours in and we haven't even discussed India, right?
Yeah. I guess we have to leave it, I don't know, for another occasion.
But speaking about the digital content, that's why I'm suggesting just to try everybody who comes here. I always suggest to try within their own life some type of digital content creation, whether it be photos on Instagram or some small blogs, vlogs, or whatever the case may be. It's just that nobody really knows how to actually use it.
But the thing is, isn't that market also a little bit saturated?
You would think, but think about it this way. If we two had a discussion about India for the past 2 hours, trust me, Indian people would flock to it. I don't know why, but it's the self-conscious thing that, somebody in the world is speaking and thinking about us. So let's just check it out. And see, that's the thing about every digital content creation moment. What does that, let's say, picture or video really address? And most of it is not, yeah, this is my life. Most of it is some type of reflection to the audience, right? If some little kid sees a dude in a sports car, he might think, oh, I would like to have that as well, right? If they see some nice clothes, oh, I would like to have that as well. So I think it's a reflection thing, and self-consciousness is never enough. It's never enough. It's like eating or anything else. It's needed every time, but it's definitely not 24/7, right? At one point you get a little bit saturated, and then you get a little bit hungry again, and then again, and I think it's the same. I think it's the same. It's just that what now is the greatest possibility that everybody can have their own viewpoint on things. Imagine, I mean, you are a Portuguese dude living in the Czech Republic, sitting now in Latvia, and we spoke about American politics, right?
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. What's the logical trade in those?
Indeed, I mean, 100 years ago, people would probably think that it would be impossible.
I think 100 years ago it was quite possible, right? Because people were traveling all over the place, either fleeing the war or something like that. I think so.
Well, or maybe it wouldn't be so easy.
Because my grandfather and his father, either his father or his brother, I don't remember, but they were sentenced to death, for instance, in Latvia. So they fled, and I think my grandfather's brother was also in Brazil.
Really?
Right?
Yeah, I
and he
believe
just
there
came
are
back.
some descendants of Latvians in Brazil.
Yeah, quite a few.
A lot of
Quite a
European diasporas. There's Latvians, Poles, Italians, Germans.
The funny thing about it is, people who went to North America, they still somehow preserved the language. People who went to South America, none of that.
Mhm.
I mean, I had this summer in 2018 summer a guest from Brazil,
Yeah.
and she said, she showed me, she didn't even speak English. She only spoke Portuguese. But we communicated through Google Translate, and she showed me her some photos, some texts, and basically she was the granddaughter, great granddaughter of a man who had emigrated from Latvia, right? And so they made I don't remember how they called, but I think it was called Nuo Rio, something like that. Oh, basically New Rio, right? And so they emigrated that, and yeah, there was a Latvian population, and now she doesn't speak a word, not just Latvian, not even English. She just speaks Portuguese. But she
travel around?
But she looks like she would be from somewhere around here.
Well, yeah, because
looks like an old lady from
they
here.
still preserve some physical traits. Yeah.
Which is weird, because if I would go to Brazil, I would definitely make some babies with those local Copacabana chicks.
Well,
that's the whole point of going abroad, right?
well, the Portuguese did that
You
a
enjoy
lot in the
yourself.
colonies, and mixed a lot. The Portuguese did it a lot during colonization.
Is
They
actually
mixed a lot.
Portuguese the same as Brazilian Portuguese?
It's the same language, but it's like different accents. It's considered a different dialect because they have some different words, and it's a different.
Because I think the Brazilians speak a little bit more funny than the
they
Portuguese.
do.
Right?
Yeah. But how did that girl manage? But was she young?
No, she was.
She
was around 60.
So it was a lady. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then I understand.
But the funny thing is, she came to Latvia because she heard that because she's a descendant of a Latvian, she might get citizenship.
And did she get it?
I don't know, but she had to actually pass some type of exam. and she said that she wanted to prepare for it, right? But even after a month, she didn't speak one word Latvian. So I don't know. I don't know what happened to her.
Well,
But
maybe I speak more Latvian than her then, because even I learned some words.
I guess so.
It was strange staying in Lithuania, because I didn't know any word, but I had to get some Lithuanian words which sound really strange, because I wanted to speak Polish to them, but they wouldn't. Just one man that was selling souvenirs, I could speak with him in Polish, because otherwise, but they all spoke a lot of English. I was so surprised. I was kind of embarrassed by it. Like, wow, they speak English. Because I remember when I first went to Czech Republic, I expected them to speak English because I didn't have much experience living as an expat. And that was quite a shock. Now I got more assimilated. I learned some Czech, enough to get around.
Czech people do speak English, right? Quite a lot.
Depends. I mean, in Prague they do. You're just fine. But in other places, not so much. They are not.
Are those places you would like to visit in the first place?
Yes, many places there. The good thing about the Czech Republic, because probably you just know Prague, but I'd say that the best of Czech Republic is not Prague. It's all the other different small cities. They have beautiful natural parks. It's really nice. I really appreciate it.
Dude, I'm telling you, you need to make a travel vlog about brothels in Europe. You would be totally popular. Because nobody does that, right?
Yeah.
Nobody does it. Speaking about censorship, that's another thing, right? Because YouTube wouldn't allow you to probably have that type of content. You would probably have to put it on some other platforms.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if it was just you speaking about brothels, I mean, they couldn't censor you. Say, okay, I went to this brothel.
But once you would
it's here and there.
Yeah, but if you start showing nudity, that's cut off.
But I don't think even the brothel would allow you to film there,
Well, that's a totally different situation, yes, if they would allow it. But see, that's also the case. We are sort of comfortable with YouTube having the right to tell you, no nudity, children, family friendly. But on the other hand, you can totally curse.
Yeah.
Right? You can definitely play music and video games that are violent and all that stuff, but no boobs. No boobs.
By the way, back on the topic of languages, how common, because I've heard that it's very common that people here are bilingual or trilingual. Is it that common? I mean, at least two languages they speak.
Either Latvian and Russian or Latvian English. Yes.
Okay. Is there any community? I've heard that there is like some communities. There used to be communities of Poles, ethnic Poles here in Latvia.
No, I don't know about Poles as a community, but there are definitely Poles living in Latvia for sure. I mean, Ukrainians, Belarusians, Russians, Poles, maybe even some Czech people, but not too many. Yeah, for sure. I don't know about communities though, because then it might be some small group of people.
That in Daugavpils, there were some Poles.
Really? In Daugavpils?
I think that parts of Latvia used to belong to Poland way back. So there was
to Poland and Lithuanian kingdom, yes.
Commonwealth, yeah.
I mean, look, I don't know whether or not that plays a major part when it comes to the 21st century, but before Latvia was even independent, starting 1918, it was either Russia, Germany. Sweden, right? So
didn't the Danish also occupy
Denmark? I'm not sure. Well, maybe during the whole disputes between the Scandinavian countries and Poland, maybe. But other than that, it was usually Germany, Russia, Sweden, Poland, and a mix of them. I guess that's one difference, right? Portugal was never really conquered, right?
Only by Spain.
The
Arabs, yes.
Yeah.
But that was before the country was born, and then the country was born, and they reconquered the whole rest of the peninsula from the Arabs, and then there was basically annexed by Spain, between 1580 and
But how come?
1640.
Spain is not one country with Portugal?
Well, I've been asked that quite a lot, but I don't know because these are two different.
Because you definitely probably have so many commonalities, right?
Yeah, but it's like it's not the same. I mean, if you think about it, even Czech and Slovakia, the Czech Republic and Slovakia, they are two separate countries.
Look, you could probably make the case that Catalonia is also a separate country.
Well, they do make that case, and they do have some differences, at least
But they could
linguistically.
but they could also stay in Spain. It's no big deal.
Yeah. But I mean, Portugal has been independent from Spain for years, and Spain before it was not Spain, the whole country. It was several kingdoms. It was Castilla, it was Leon. It was several small kingdoms there.
Then
Then they just united.
Then they should have just stayed that way, right?
Yeah, I guess so. This is why you have so much, division between certain regions. And even culturally and linguistically, the region of Spain, they have much starker contrast than, for example, in Portugal. Because the way that people speak in Galicia or in Catalonia or in Andalusia is completely different from, for example, from Madrid. And they had some substantial cultural differences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Should we wrap it up?
Well, I guess I've been for quite long.
Any other major topics that we left out?
Well,
I don't think so.
No.
For one evening, it was quite comprehensive, I would say. Yeah,
we spent a whole lot of topics.
Yeah, well, we definitely addressed some issues regarding America, Czech Republic, a little bit India. Still managed to get some in.
Some
right?
India,
Yeah.
Latvia, of course, even Spain now.
So yeah, I'm actually looking forward to you deciding where you will go next. If you decide to go to another country after the Czech Republic.
Yeah, we'll see.
Because your type of people are not too many. I would say you are one of the rare people who are actually sort of brave enough to seek out other opportunities outside their country, but to actually improve their standards of doing it. Because if you talk about other immigrants, many times it's just that, you maybe have a bigger salary, but you are living not really more pleasant. It's just you get a bigger salary and you can eat more chips.
Well, yeah. And some people, which is something that I don't necessarily agree with, because they just go to somewhere, they get a better salary or a better job, they have a good standard of living, and they don't care so much, I guess, about assimilating, especially in non-English speaking countries. I'm not saying that it's all the cases. I am mostly about Portuguese immigration, because I usually follow some podcasts in our public radio, which is daily interviews with Portuguese expats.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, if they go to, of course, UK, United States, Canada, they learn the language because, it's English. If they go to Spain, they easily learn the language. In Germany as well, because even though German is quite challenging for us to learn, it's very strong. I mean, it's in Germany, so it's pretty much mandatory for people to speak German. They couldn't get around. But when they go to, smaller countries like Netherlands, even in Scandinavia, and for example, to the countries of the former so-called Eastern Bloc, they're not so keen on learning the language. Even some people can get some good jobs, let's say in Czech Republic, in Poland, or what have you, and they don't even bother learning the language. For example, I saw one documentary about Portuguese expats living in Riga.
There's a documentary about Portuguese expats.
It's like kind of a report made by our public television, because it's like a series about Portuguese expats around the world. And one of the episodes was about Riga, Latvia. And none of them, they bothered to learn the language, and they didn't get so much immersed into the culture.
If they speak English, it's fine by me.
But they should learn the language.
I don't know. Look at it this way. Latvian language is just it's just a compilation of different languages, I think. I think, because it used to be the branch of languages that Latvian is in is Lithuania and ancient Prussian.
Yeah, and also isn't there Livonian? which is
Well,
almost extinct because I believe
yeah,
there are
yeah,
no more native
sort of,
speakers alive. It's just like 40 speakers or 200 speakers who learn it as a secondary language.
Yeah, I guess so. But again, I mean, that's something for nostalgic purposes, I guess.
Yeah.
But-
It depends of your interests. You know, I have some interest on this language and these areas. I don't know. I kind of developed. I didn't know much about this so-called former Eastern Bloc,
Yeah.
which is because people call it Eastern Europe. I don't like to call it Eastern Europe. You know, before I took
But
over,
it is,
you know,
but it is Eastern Europe.
well, Czech Republic is Central Europe, and so is Poland. And Latvia is Northeastern Europe. Eastern Europe is Romania, Belarus, Bulgaria. That is Eastern Europe.
I see your point. I see your point.
But again, I'm a little bit, you know, conscious about this.
Mm.
But normally in Portugal, say what Czech Republic, it's Eastern Europe or Poland or like it's just almost the same as Russia, you know, because people
Well,
don't know.
in some aspects it might be, but I think I always say people from the old European countries, I think probably the best country in the world might be Netherlands. Overall speaking, except the funny language, they should ditch that. But from the new European Union countries, the best countries are Poland and Czech Republic.
Yeah, they are really good.
The others could just learn a bit or two, and that's it. But I don't think that the language
Czech
is.
Republic has, by the way, I believe they have the lowest unemployment in the European Union for several years in a row,
Might be the case.
or among the lowest, certainly.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how
Like
they.
3 or 4%.
I don't know
really
how they measure the unemployment though, because I think about Spain they always used to say that they have 20% unemployment or something like that. But I'll just say, well, maybe they're just lazy. Maybe they have a lot of work to do, but they
Well,
just
there was a
don't.
lot of layoffs.
Because I think the Spanish people really do have siestas during the day.
I don't think they do have it now.
As far as I can tell, the people who are here, for instance, for the NATO
Mhm.
integration, right? They, as far as I've heard, yeah, they go out for 2 hours in the middle of the day.
I've heard that, but I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, if that's the case, hey, of course you will have 20% unemployment. Well, that's no discipline.
I don't know.
But then again, it's probably pretty laid back. I would guess. If you have a little money, you should at least have some fun
Yeah,
being
yeah.
poor, in a sense. Yeah, actually, you know what? I was discussing recently that sometimes, let's say, if you would be in Latvia, if you would be working and living in Latvia, you might be even more interested in national security than some local folks, because you actually chose to be in a particular territory rather than just being
But
born there.
how dangerous or how safe is it? Because I've heard that there is like this ramping up the tensions with Russia, and there is a lot of military presence. At least in Estonia, they have quite a few military presence there.
I don't know if it's ramping up. It's just that after the Ukraine incident, everybody's on
Kind of.
on sort of a short leash.
Yeah.
But I honestly think it's just not really a hoax, but it's more or less a reason to just spend more money on some useless stuff.
Well, I've heard that actually Latvians, or as a whole, they have kind of mixed feelings, because Estonia is pretty much anti-Russian. They don't even have some much regard for their Russian minorities. I've heard that Latvia is more kind of ambivalent.
I don't think anybody is against Russia, but they are against Russian imperialism.
Yeah, well,
right.
But then again, they are aligning themselves with American imperialism. They don't mind having Americans all over.
Well, the biggest difference is this: if you have Russian imperialism, Putin is great, and nobody criticizes Putin on public radio, for instance,
Yeah.
right? Other than that, you are fine. If you are to the Americans, Yeah, you can say whatever you want about the
No, but then
Americans.
again, you'll have their soldiers, disrespecting the Freedom Monument. I just read in the news, it's quite common that they get drunk, they urinate in the statue, they
I don't know how
vandalize the
common it
gardens.
is because it's quite a grave offense. I mean, yes, of course, sometimes that happens if somebody gets too drunk, but yeah, I don't know if that's a big, if it's a major problem because it's a fairly grave offense, right? To piss on a monument.
Imagine if you go to the United States and you piss on the the monument in Washington or the Statue of Liberty. I don't think they will be too happy.
No. What I'm saying is that those people who do that, they get punished for it, and if it would be a military person, they would probably get sent off. They wouldn't even stay here.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's the case.
Because it's a big, well, it's considered a big disrespect on ethical grounds. If you ask me, why not just have a public toilet over there?
Yeah,
Right, would make life more easier.
yeah they should have.
Because honestly, I don't think that will continue on in the 21st and the 22nd century. This type of symbolism that has been going on for the past centuries. That every time, because I think Napoleon was the one who said that I have recognized quite an exploitable weakness of men. They are even willing to die for some ornaments and some medals.
Well,
Right.
the Americans certainly.
Well, that is something weird because if you think about it, nobody is really interested in just fighting for nothing, right? You
Yeah.
have to have a reason, and that's
Some
what I'm saying.
idea, some-
Somebody who chooses to actually come here and stay here and do some business, let's say here, he might be more interested in actually protecting this territory than somebody who just is miserable all day long.
Yeah.
How is it in Portugal? Do you have in Portugal a national guard?
We do have. But we are part of NATO, so we're kind of. I mean, our military is not too strong, but we participate. Mostly, we just participate in NATO missions. We go provide some humanitarian
But do you mean the army, right?
Yeah, the army.
But do
The
you have
National
also?
Guard, yeah, we do have, but it's like just more symbolic,
Hmm.
I guess. Like for the monuments, for the chief of state, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess.
Yeah. All right.
Is it like that in Latvia?
Well, it is more integrated, I would say. It started off almost separate from the army, but now it's more integrated. And well, the biggest difference is this: that in many respects we are dependent on some type of other institutions
Mm-hmm.
to do their job, and so I don't think that is something I think that should be fixed in a sense, because other than that, it's just if for you to do your job, you have to wait for somebody else to do theirs. It's a mix-up. It would be better if you could do your job independently, and if they do theirs, it might just compound the effect or something like that.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah. All right, it's been 2.5 hours.
Quite long.
We can call it a night. Thank
Yeah,
you,
thank you.
and
Thank you for
well,
having
let
me.
me know if you anytime nearby again.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm actually thinking about returning to